The Peculiar Persecution of John Vincent Harden is copyright 2017 and copyright renewed 2025 by its author Sandor Jay Sonnen. All rights reserved. Endeavours of Sherlock Holmes. 8. The Peculiar Persecution of John Vincent Harden by Sandor Jay Sonnen. It was on a spring evening in 1895 that Sherlock Holmes first received a plea from Mr. John Vincent Harden of South Carolina, one of the southern of the United States of America. A boy from the Cardison Hotel had followed Mrs. Hudson up the stairs, and abiding by instructions given him by Mr. Harden, it was only to my friend whom he would give up the sealed envelope in his possession. "You know the Cardison Private Hotel on Exeter Street?" he asked me. "It is by the Lyceum Theatre." "Yes, of course," I replied. Holmes took the opener from his desk and made a clean tear of the envelope. He scanned the single sheet that had been inside, then glanced at the clock and shook his head. He pondered a moment, then walked to his secretary and spent a moment writing upon a sheet of his own stationery. He sealed the sheet and handed it to the lad. "You come to me from John Harden, the tobacco industrialist. He is staying at the Cardison?" "He is, sir," said the boy. "Take him that straight away." "Yes, sir," he said, before turning and nearly running out the door. "I'm sorry, sir," said Mrs. Hudson. "The boy was insistent. He would not leave, would give the note he had only to you, and he followed me about until I let him come up with me." Our landlady seemed annoyed at herself for the freedom she appeared to have given the youth. The hour had become late. Holmes handed me the note. "Mr. Holmes." It read, "I know you from reputation, and can only pray I have the address correct. Should this reach you by means of the young man to whom I entrusted this letter, write me a return note that you will be able to come to my suite at the Cardison Hotel, tonight at 9:30. My nerves have been taken to their breaking point. J.V. Harden. How holds your constitution this evening, Watson?" "It bears up," I answered my friend. "Will your plans for this night allow you to accompany me?" "I shall join you to see this man," said I. "It is a rather interesting time to call on me. He is alone here in London. He must be, otherwise he would have sought other means to deal with this." We alighted from our hansom, and the Cardison's doorman directed us to the manager, and a page took us to the mid-floor suites. He led us to a double door of oak that demonstrated we were at one of the more special rooms within the hotel. A parlour-maid in the service uniform of the hotel's staff answered the door, and before us was an ornate entry. She ushered us into the small area of tile. In the living room beyond stood a man in his late 50s, dressed in his American suit. Below were black western boots, stitched with embroidery and artistry, black threading on black leather, and only careful examination would show to an observer this was a detail identifying an understated expense. Looking above the boots showed he wore wool trousers, and on the man was a coat of the same material, a handsome dark grey with light pinstriping. He wore a vest and dark tie, and on the sofa near to him was a short black top hat. "Good evening, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," the man said to the both of us. "I am John Vincent Harden of Charleston, South Carolina. I only know you from your reputation for solving the problems people have to deal with, which can sometimes involve an investigation. I thank you for coming immediately, as I have a deep problem, and from it I have become very troubled. Your note provided no explanation for whatever need from me you may have, but I am at your service. This is my colleague, Dr. John Watson." The man sighed. "Please be seated, and I will share with you my problem, and then you may say if you can give to me your assistance in what has become a strange series of events. In truth, if I were in my native land, I would have available to me those who would help me in an instant. It is only that I must stay in London on business, and for that reason I need turn to someone capable of working in the elements of—" The man paused. He resumed, "the fantastic." That word alone was enough to move my friend into the room and sit beside his host. We turned down any libation, but he insisted we enjoy with him one of many cigars that were in several boxes on the large table before us. "Well, Mr. Harden, you are indeed known for your cigars. My friend was reading about your coming to our city to expand the sales of your product. Dr. Watson and I occasionally discuss tobacco, but I also take such an interest for professional reasons. I admit to reading the story in the Daily Telegraph from now over a week ago, where your arrival was heralded as an important step in spreading commercial contacts with the Kingdom and with Europe. This is one of my own mark, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, the blue star at its surround, is taken from our family's crest, placed there to make a statement of quality, by which those who appreciate tobacco can tell they are having an experience of perfection. Mr. Harden opened one of the wood containers, offering us each a cigar. We do have in America, he continued, a number of tobacconists who manufacture many variety of product. Some impress the purchaser purely due to cost. This is not one of those. This is for an evening of pure enjoyment. The gold on the band added to the blue star is our way of denoting our finest tobacco, made by our most careful attention to detail. The plant is grown of perfect seed, unblended and taken from a soil now in its 5th generation of planting and cultivation. The plants produced have their leaves hand-separated and rolled under an open trellis. That is the perfect balance of continued sunshine and a shaded environment. 300 girls use their 2 hands trimming the leaf, and this is part of a one-moment process where the girl takes 100 seconds to prepare and roll the leaf on her naked thigh in the warmth of the Caribbean climate. This process is not of a machine in the least. Afterward, men take the final work from the women, and with hand trimmers, they cut away any excess of leaf. It is only then that it is a cigar. Afterward, it will become one in a box of 2 dozen. I can go on about this process in relation to this particular cigar, but it is enough for now that you know it is our finest commercial offering, not including the specialty cigars we offer under commission. The Havana-grown Larga Vista. It is very popular and has come to define my company. The mark has made my company in every way. Fame, a good write-up by the experts, and naturally sales. It was a lengthy 7-year struggle, but now I know the sweetness of success. Of these I sold last year near 80 million of them, and we mean to break better records this year. Well, said Holmes, I am not taking too many liberties by laying before you that I do know something about cigars and their construction and tobacco in general. So the description of your special tobacco's growth as plants and the making of them into the kind of cigars which your customers most appreciate is not lost on me, and I am an enthusiast as well. Then you may enjoy this experience, Mr. Holmes. It is in fact why I sailed to Southampton and made my way to London. I arrived 2 weeks ago with 2,000 of the Larga Vista in hand, and at your customs at Southampton is my cargo of tens of thousands of boxes, which will be used to begin sales. I have entertained potential distributors here in London. Those I have met are meeting with their principals and are putting together their offers to distribute. These parties, spaced one every few nights, were nothing short of great success, and it is fair to say I will make for myself several millions in your pound sterling, as well as francs and marks and lire and other values in foreign currency over the next few years, based on exclusive distribution agreements, each of 7 years for the European markets. And now you know my business, finished Mr. Harden in his Southern American accent, where the word my was pronounced in a softer manner, and with a touch of sentiment, as though he was letting Holmes and I in on one of his most personal interests. Then if you do not mind the interruption, Mr. Harden, my coming to see you this evening does not have to do with the cigars you brought by ship. In truth, I cannot say. It does not make any sense what has happened would be because of my business interests. No, sir, this appears to be personal. I have no other way to place my ideas into words without letting you in on the notion that in some manner I am being persecuted. Harden, who had up to this time been steadfast in his presenting to us a man of fortitude, showed dread. Then tell us, Holmes said. Harden looked at my friend and at me. He made a frown of a kind and straightened his coat for a moment, then looked up. The very night after these first stage meetings were concluded, I went to bed late. A brandy and 2 of my cigars meant that when I did drop off, I would have a deep sleep. Then, in that very foyer to these rooms, the man pointed to the space beside the front door to the apartment. There was a noise which took me from my bed, and it was a long time in my fully waking. Out into this living room, I made my way in the darkened atmosphere to the entry area. Before me was a table alien to the room, and of no similar look to any of these furnishings you see around you. It was rounded and covered with a red cloth, of what I thought may be of velvet or similar. How could you, Mr. Harden, determine what the covering may have been in the darkness?" my friend asked. Because Mr. Holmes, on top of the table was a stack of skulls, painted green and orange and red, several of them, one atop the other, creating a small pyramid shape of skulls, and in each of them was a small flame made by a shortened, deeply melted candle. This made the entire area glow in an eerie manner. The moonlight, seeping through the open shades of those windows, lit up the pile of skulls and gave it this Halloween-like illumination. "The windows themselves?" asked Holmes. "The windows have been opened and have stayed opened since the day I moved into the rooms. The cigar smoke warrants that. But we are 2 floors above, and you will see there is no nearby balcony or piping on the wall beside the windows. There is no way to climb up and enter into these rooms." "This is certainly, even at first blush, in the realm of the amazing," said Holmes, looking to the entry of the room. "But as you say, persecuted, the word implies you describe only the first of a series of events. Yet, let us not stay from the first of them just yet. What then did you do? I presume your room's private hotel staff had retired to their own quarters, and no one remains in service in any of the rooms within your let." "Quite so, Mr. Holmes. I was alone at that moment. I was for a while aghast at what I had beheld, but after a lengthy minute, I gathered my wits, and I lit 2 of the lamps here in the room, and saw the display for what it was, just as I had described it, but now with less menace, and my taking on a more forensic study of the display. I left my rooms and found the night man on duty at the front desk. A bit groggy, but in a serviceable manner, he followed me up the stairs, and upon entering the room, the whole of the setup was gone. All of it. Skulls, cover, table, all gone. "What do you estimate this pile of skulls to be in size?" asked the detective. "Ha, I can do better," replied Harden. "Before I ran downstairs to bring up help, I took hold of the table and know it was very substantial. I shook it and understood its medium weight, about 20 pounds in all. It could be lifted up and taken away by someone of average strength, and it was gone when I returned. I saw no one on the landing or stairs when I used them to reach the lobby. I shall examine the hall, though to little avail due to the many days between the event and this evening," said my friend. "How did the morning evolve?" he asked the man, becoming frustrated as he relived the event. "I needn't tell you I had no real sleep afterward, from 4 until the dawn. Certainly I called for coffee when the kitchen opened, and I was by then fully dressed. I contacted the manager at 8:30. There was no evidence of this thing, and the man wondered over my certainty of the event. The house detective called on me at 10, and together we looked over the room and the hall, and naturally the service stairs. There was not a trace to be found of any skulls, or cloth, or candle use, or table. The kitchen had no staff at the ground level, but 2 night girls and boy were there, laundering piles of clothing and bedding, polishing shoes, and cleaning suits and slacks. I was not above going to these areas with the detective to see what anyone dragging such a piece of furniture down the stairs would find, and who they would have to get past to make it to the door of the service entrance and to any egress, or the alleyway beyond for the carts which bring to the hotel foods, materials, and everything else you may imagine is necessary." "The detective's final opinion?" asked Holmes. "Naught. What was there for him to say? He did wonder at who I knew in the city, and whether any of my friends or acquaintances would have a rag on by playing me the fool. I told him that was out of the question. Yes, you have no such people, and those you know would only want you to experience the most excellent evenings, one after the other." Holmes stated the obvious. "Exactly," agreed Harden. "But you are here, sir, and have not been harmed. Whoever did this and did whatever you haven't yet discussed with me, this person or people do not appear to have the sinister intent that would include bodily harm." "Of course not." Harden was frustrated. "It is a persecution, not an assault. Whatever is behind this wants me of sound body to experience the results of their scheme." "Then their next mental attack was of what form?" Holmes asked. "A few days later, no. A few nights later, I was not yet asleep. Once more it was late in that the maid assigned to my suite had retired to wherever she stays in this place or back to her home, and I was by myself enjoying a scotch and cigar, and that telephone there at the desk buzzed. I answered it, and the girl downstairs told me there was a call for me from the Trafalgar Exchange, which I found later meant it came from a post office at the square there, which is one with a full-time telephone for use at all times, day and night. I did not understand this at the time the call came into the hotel, but I know now how your system here in England operates. I have met the people who oversee the telephone at night there, and they were of no use in remembering anything. But that is all by the way. The girl put in the call from the post office, and over the wire came this blood-curdling voice, more creature than that of a man or woman. Harden looked to Holmes and saw my friend's typical reaction of a partial smile. But he, not knowing Holmes's excitement over such details, misunderstood him and acted as if he had been rebuffed by the man he had turned to for help. "You believe me to be unnecessarily bizarre, Mr. Holmes?" "Not at all, not at all. I am intrigued and quite interested." The voice spoke the same phrases 3 times. They were phrases as if to be an incantation of some kind, though I had no understanding of it, and I did not in the least recognize it whatsoever. "Do you remember the exact words of this incantation?" asked Holmes. "The passage is sealed into my memory. 'Thou hast transgressed, thou hast taken the fruits of the labours of the fields. The witch of the fields will slay thee. Azaka Mayday. Azaka Mayday. Azaka Mayday. He is the witch of the fields, and he will have his way.'" More of the same, Mr. Holmes. After the first of the versions of these groups of phrases, I demanded to know who it was, but the voice merely repeated the incantation again, and in this overly evil and sly manner, this intentional scare built within the speaking of the sentences. "The witch of the fields, you say?" Holmes looked into the eyes of Harden with deep intensity. "Azaka Mayday being given as a name of a kind. And you have taken the fruits of their labours," the voice says. "Well, does that mean anything to you? Whoever staged this telephone call, and presuming it is in relation to the diorama left in your entry, this person has you specifically designated as their unmistakable target. It makes no sense for it to be done to you, unless you understand its meaning immediately. Otherwise, why toy with you in such a manner?" "As you say, Mr. Holmes, but it makes no sense to me. I have had no association with people of these names during my professional lifetime. Naturally, I made enemies when I was in my 20s, but my enemies were men whose names I did not know, and they did not know mine." "You refer to your participation in the Southern War in your country?" "Yes, Mr. Holmes, and we have no witches or azakas from those times. And I was not political. After the war's end, I returned to my father's farm, and he had lost the family of 4 slaves who worked our fields. But we weren't that well off to begin with, and there's no reason why my father or my father has passed on, should be singled out. We were average cotton farmers. We did not have a plantation, but merely a crop. There were many families better off than we, and the family who lived with us, as our slaves left our farm, halfway through the war, and disappeared and severed any connection with us whatsoever. My father was nearly 50 at that time, and though there were men who fought at that age, he did not. I was at war when President Lincoln announced that any slaves in states that were the enemy to the United States, which included our slaves, were free and could make their way to the North. Naturally, South Carolina did not acknowledge this freedom, but a year later we did not have the power to police the slaves who left their masters, and it was as good as if we accepted this edict of freedom. Our slaves were a family, and if Joe Buck came to me, I would give him and his kin jobs, if that's what he wanted, but that never happened. The Buck family would not need to go about the way of this torment." "You do not believe this is the work of that family or a descendant?" "Of course not, Mr. Holmes. I deal in a world of plain reality, and not in one of scaring one another to achieve an end." "But the torment will not cease." "No, sir, it persists. Last night the phone call once more. 'Thou hast transgressed. Thou hast taken the fruits of the labours of the fields. The witch of the fields will slay thee. Isidore, Isidore, Isidore. He is the witch of the fields, and he will have his way.'" The name was changed, but only that. Holmes sat riveted by what the man had told him. "I will take very seriously your problem, Mr. Harden. Aside from my interest that you are not so persecuted, I am also professionally curious over the method chosen by your adversary. It is quite singular in my study of criminal behaviour. As we agree, what can be the purpose of making a torment that includes references by which the victim is unaware of their meaning? What can you do for me then, Mr. Holmes?" "I will need to study this, Mr. Harden. What a man has designed another can unravel. These words must mean something, and we live in a tangible world defined by space and reason. I do not promise miracles, but I do promise to you my industry. If you will put your trust in me for 2 or 3 days, I will come to you again when I hope to have for you a development." Our host rose. "I can ask for nothing better, Mr. Holmes. I will wait out that time, and I will send to you any news of a new thing done against me by this person." During the following morning, Holmes returned to the hotel to look about many areas that had been unavailable to him during the previous night. This hotel detective is unimaginative at the least. He did not see the connection between the movement of 2 mattresses from the storage rooms to the alley outside as having a connection with the disappearance of this skull display that was set out to frighten his guest. He thought it was the work of tramps attempting to use them for the night time. I examined them. They had splashes of red and green wax and were set out to lessen the fall of the display. As Harden said, table, cloth, skulls, all gone in an instant. All dropped from the window to the alley. 3 o'clock, no one would be there, and no one on the ground floor would have heard the disturbance of the fall. And the ability of a trespasser to lay in wait on the upper floor itself? I asked. That, too, was very possible, answered Holmes. For the service door is left ajar for the break needs of those people Harden met before they went off night duties. The men and women dealing with the overnight laundry and clothes cleaning for the guests. Their workroom is only 2 doors from the door, and this door is often partly open, and a man could go from alley to door to back stair. It is a risk, but not a poor gamble in the scheme of life. What will be your next ploy? I asked. This afternoon I began a research using the resources of the museum and reading room. I will need the weekend to look deeper into this matter. What I know so far is that something about the persecution of John Harden is based in a spiritualism that is strange and irreverent. He took from the mantel his favourite long-stemmed pipe, for when his mind was especially vexed, and did not move from his chair for all of the evening. On Saturday, Holmes was put out of his way by a visit from a before unheard of Miss Violet Smith, who had come to consult my friend without an appointment on a matter which at first appeared commonplace, but would eventually become quite horrible. Miss Smith was a most beautiful woman who had been offered higher than market pay to teach music during the weekdays at an estate in Surrey, very near the border of Hampshire. It was because of her beauty and kindness of spirit, and a certain insistency her plea be heard, that Holmes set aside time to hear her statement. It had, however, come at this crucial moment in his research related to matters of the occult that appeared to form the basis of Harden's unique form of persecution. Holmes, unable to leave to go to where the young woman had been employed, in Farnham, sent me in his stead. I proved on this occasion to be of no real value to him in the matter of Miss Smith, though I did indirectly allow him to work on the matter relating to Harden's problem. During my day in Farnham and the day afterward, Holmes had an interview with a person whose history was elemental to his learning of the series of artistic displays by which Mr. Harden had been tormented. He was also able to revisit the British Museum's reading room, a place which had on more than one occasion given him a valuable understanding into the history and purpose of a given artefact. Holmes also attended the Mass given at the Roman Catholic Church of Saints Alban and Stephen, just outside of Hatfield, where he spent some time. Despite his researches, he determined the next day to travel to Farnham himself, in hopes of producing some substantive facts related to Miss Smith's problem. He returned late that very day after having been in a fight at one of the town's country pubs. That invigorated him and had a positive effect on the Harden case. He had during the weekend the elevation of both cases and found himself in the unusual circumstance which he had worked throughout his profession to prevent, where one investigation he had already begun was now overlapped by a second. Miss Smith's letters to our address at Baker Street became more ominous, and Holmes found his thoughts divided between the needs of his now very definite clients, both apparently in some form of danger. The day after Holmes's fight at the inn found the arrival of a package sent to him from the Cardisson Hotel, and its contents were the strangest imaginable. I walked into the sitting room and found my friend at the dining table, excited and filled with vigour and resolution. Look on the table there. Friend Harden sent it to me by means of one of these boys who serves the Cardisson. I did not have the heart to wake you to look at it when it arrived, and enjoyed some of this morning to be by myself. It has allowed me to settle my thoughts. Inside of a plain box was a sack that reminded me of Beggar's homely purse, made of a poor material and wound by a knotted cord. I opened this and found inside of it nothing but dirt. Also in the box was a small set of pipes made of wood and having the look of being used over time, pitted and worn. With these items was a note from John Vincent Harden, Mr. Holmes. It read, "At near 3 o'clock this morning, there was the sound of a rattle against my door. I do not know for how long it was made, but when I opened the door, there was only this left just outside of it in the hallway. This has moved to make me now deeply angry, as much as it has made me upset, over some impending doom. What does this all mean, J.V. Harden?" Strangely, this omen did not undo my friend, but quite the reverse. The morning saw a new man in my friend, and he apparently had asked our landlady for more of our dinner from the previous evening. I would have none of that, and when she came around, I asked for fresh coffee, before I broke fast with a more traditional morning meal. But Holmes's interest in eating meant he had a mental breakthrough in some form or another. "You made a reasoning of importance." "Most assuredly, Watson. A new understanding, and they are cards I will play for all they are worth. It is all wrong, you know. All wrong, and we are looking at things from the inside out. And now with a fresh taking in of all that is about us, we can live in the harsh world of reality. It is less romantic, but should you ever put pen and paper to this affair, you will clean that all up. Your pulling at my heels means at least your disposition has improved. I am going to reward myself upon the conclusion of friend Harden's problem and Miss Violet Smith's endangerment, if we should take seriously her letters to us, to be what is overhanging her joyful spirit at Chiltern Grange. Sunday afternoon I will attend a discussion led by a young man whose family are all refugees, adopting England as their home. The young man is a son of this family who is making a case for Franz Liszt's B minor sonata, that it be added to the repertoire. He is Mark Hamburg. I would very much enjoy what he has to say about the work, which is nearly 50 years old, and whether there is a revisionist view of it. If I bring both the Smith and Harden matters to a successful end, I certainly will have earned my listening to what the young man has to say about the sonata, and whether its pedigree should be improved." "Revisionist! Ha!" Holmes seemed to make a private quip within his own thoughts. He then went on, "In an hour's time, if you will finish your breakfast and join me in the easy hunt for a cab, at what will be close to 10 o'clock, we shall investigate our own revisionist view of what has been placed before our eyes. We may then determine who it is who has been working to persecute our client. By that I mean our client, Mr. Harden. At the same time, I do wish not to stray too far from home, as I am expecting another letter from Miss Smith, sent by her from Chiltern Grange, asking my advice in wondering whether she should attempt to last until the weekend, or in fact stating she is interested in her immediate departure from there upon her usual Saturday morning return to her mother, never to return to Mr. Carruthers' employ." We were in a hansom rattling through London on what had become an April of foggy nights. The past few days had put into clear understanding exactly why my friend did not like when one case interfered with another. It had become difficult to keep both persecutions separate from the other, if indeed Miss Smith's being followed was a form of persecution in the same way as that or Harden. He was being faced with these collections of skulls and artifacts as direct enemy action. Miss Smith's being followed did not necessarily carry with it the same danger. The man with the great beard could be following her with a design of purpose that may not be persecution. It was in our ride, Sherlock Holmes began a lengthy monologue as he ruminated over what had over the weekend vexed him in his determinations. "I see with new eyes, Watson. I had incorrectly viewed these warnings, these fetishes, as the genuine article of threat and fright, for that is indeed their underlying purpose. I use that word as both my research and a priest I met at that church I visited used that expression specifically. Fetishes being an artifact one can hold and touch, believed to have supernatural powers. But they are not genuine. That has been my faulty premise. If we revise our understanding of the tableau, we ask ourselves, how is it possible for one to know the appearance of the fetishes, but not the substantive meaning behind each of them? We are left with the conclusion that their maker is not then a practitioner of vaudou arts, but merely an observer of the use of the articles. This means he lacked the language. How does a man lack the language but know the surface details of the forms? He never conversed about them, yet he saw them, and to see them he had to penetrate into the heart of the living areas, to where he knew Harden had been. Not an easy task to do in either past or present. In the past, a white man from America would generally not find himself in the deep regions of the island of Haiti. In the present, the new government that represents the population has declared these forms of the occult to be unlawful. "You speak in riddles," I finally said to my friend. "I do not mean to be mysterious for its own sake. John Vincent Harden's persecution is based in the iconography of Haitian Vodou, a religious practice removed from Africa by the captured slaves forced to live in the Caribbean islands. And in this forced removal, these things that are the symbols of its practice have been conflated with those of the Catholic faith." "So you spoke with someone associated with the Roman Church to help you in this matter?" "I did. And it was not so simple finding someone with any of this knowledge. It is so esoteric and not on the mental fingertips of your average reverend father of that faith. One has to experience it in some way." "You were not able to do that, I should think," said I. "No, I was not. My knowledge comes from the only two writings made by those who have visited into the heart of one of the areas where these beliefs have been practiced. One is from the 17th century, and by a priest. The other is by a French historian, and my knowledge of that language, which serves me well, was stretched to its limits due to the unusual subject matter. Why has this unknown tormentor of Harden chosen the symbols of the Vodou religion as his means of persecution?" I asked Holmes. He answered me, "As I began my research, I believed I was searching for an islander who was versed in Vodou and was calling upon one of its various charms and spells related to vengeance to bring a harm to our client. I also believed this person wanted Harden to, at the same time, reflect upon something related to his past, where he would have been involved in a group where Vodou practice was part of its culture. But it is only today, reflecting on this new fetish Harden sent to me this morning, which brings me to a new and correct understanding of the true nature of a concept that was discussed by the French author, that of syncretism." "That word is new to me," said I. "Syncretism is a rarely used expression for what has become the method of how these originally African symbols and holy persons from one belief system are disguised as characters from another pantheon to align the old practice with the new. Some cultures do this outright and without guile. Merging one group of holy persons with another can bring about a new version of dogma of which parishioners may worship from. And yet the term new does not make sense in the accepted understanding. It is a newer version of a previously ordered canon, blending old ideas with the new. Typical use of the term is where one culture conquers another culture, especially one pagan group forcing control over another, and the invaded culture accepts the new gods, but uses the imagery of their previous gods in the honouring of the new ones. But there is a darker side to it, where one is using the newer gods, or divine persons, to surreptitiously honour the previous ones. That is what became of Vodou once its practice was outlawed. It became an outlawed faith by the French in Louisiana and by the islanders themselves in Haiti. But the practitioners would not give it up and took the visages and descriptions of the holy persons identified with the Catholic faith and merged them with the older Haitian gods, demigods, witches, and the like, as a means of continuing their appreciation of Vodou. Fascinating, an otherwise elegant solution to such a merge of culture. True, but you can see the built-in problem. Should an uninitiated observer take in the overt practice but not know of its details, he walks away with an incorrect understanding of what he thinks he sees. Such a thing has happened in this case. Any man who correctly understood Vodou would never combine its practice with Catholicism, as he would have no need to either disguise his practices or combine them with the majority view. He would just go about his Vodou ways and cast his charms and leave his fetishes as they in fact appear in the older, more accurate forms. How will you find this man, then? The field is considerably condensed, as I made inroads into what I believe would be the pool of people most well placed to have chosen this elaborate form of bother to our client. He would have to have been actively involved with the islanders, but not that actively involved in the depth of their studies. He would be priest who saw from his view on the outside, members of the faith practicing their religion, but not realize the syncretism. "Mr. Holmes, your mouth is broken at your lower lip," said Harden, upon seeing my friend as he entered into the living room of his suite for the second time. My friend did not discuss his event at the public house. "That is for another time, Mr. Harden. But I would report to you that I have a nearly connected case, However, there is one crucial piece missing. That bodes well, and yet does not leave me settled, sir. I have the same worry over the matter. Holmes said to the man, I have before me appearance, but not substance. It is a strangeness itself within a greater mystery. But on the good side of the ledger, it does proffer the notion that there are some points you yourself may be able to help me with, as it pertains to something that I presume to be a part of your past. Holmes walked into his client's living room, removed his hat, and saw how Harden reacted to seeing the plaster on the corner of his forehead where I had treated his injury the day before. My friend sat without invitation into one of the room's sofas. Well then, sir, come join me and answer a few questions, and we will explore more deeply into what has to be the heart of the matter. At these words, Krumom, Harden appeared to be in some surprise, as the matter had taken an unusual turn, in that Sherlock Holmes appeared to become host in his client's rooms, and not the typical reverse. Yet the man complied, and a moment later he was opposite Holmes in the other sofa, and I took a chair that was offset to where they were, allowing the men to have their conversation without my noticeable interference. Holmes leaned forward and took from the box on the table between them one of Harden's precious Lager Vista cigars. He took only a brief moment to get it going, and after a few puffs he began his inquiry. Your soil is in its 5th generation, you so stated, yet your company was incorporated under the laws of South Carolina some 7 years ago. Your first attempt at a field of tobacco was not on the island of Cuba. No, it was not, replied a worn-out Harden. It was in the French area of Hispaniola, proffered Holmes. You were told. By whom? The man asked. I was not told. I understand this is the case. Your adversary has made it understood to me. I believe he wishes for you to have it understood as well. John Vincent Harden looked coldly at the detective, reclining in his seated position and becoming perhaps too expansive in the enjoyment of his host's cigar. Holmes calmed his movements but blew a ring of smoke in the air above the both of them before lowering his eyes on the man across from him. The man gave back very little in admission. Come now, Mr. Harden. You know something of what you have experienced these past several days. Would you not rather be straightforward than coy? You do not wish to begin. Then I shall forge my way through the morass and see if I can find treasure. 7 years ago you were looking for good soil and hard workers at the cheapest price. It is nothing to be ashamed of. You were starting a venture and in need of the shortest route to immediate profits, and this meant land that was the most kind to your object of tobacco growth, but a parcel where those in authority had little or no mechanism for protecting the workers under their sway. You settled on Haiti for this purpose, and I presume underwent a series of tests to determine whether the land and people would be in harmony to achieve the pilot version of these Lager Vistas of yours. Soil does not possess the power to bring about a torment in a man, and we must therefore accept that someone has been at odds with you for some time now. For over a year, I should think, though he would have had 7 to ruminate upon his design. What happened to your Haitian workers, Mr. Harden? Nothing I could have foreseen, Mr. Holmes. But the result was still a bitter end for some or all. I was not certain. That makes little sense. You would have used your power to send out for any report of intrigue. All right, fine. I was back in the Carolinas expecting shipment by the time the mischief was made known to me. A man I had employed as overseer of the crop was unethical in not keeping the promises he made to the natives in the Haitian portion of that island. I am sorry, Mr. Harden, but to advance your case, I must ask you what it means that this man was not ethical. Holmes had ceased his freely moving about in his sofa and looked directly into the man's eyes. There were others in my employ who worked under the man who spoke in vague comments about the natives not being fully compensated for their labour. There were some disputes. Certainly you had the power to look into the matter yourself. This was still at the beginning of your company establishing itself, and were not these fields intended to be cultivated for the following year's crop? How is it you intended to exploit the land without your personal knowledge of its use, and presumably the population with whom you would hope to have a long-term relationship? Harden had become more uncomfortable with each passing question, This was not typical of Holmes accusing his client, but the man, he presumed, had to be in a position to have some or many of the answers he needed to get to the heart of the matter in which he had become engaged. "I think, perhaps, that though you have done a very satisfactory job up to this time, Mr. Holmes, that it may be in our mutual interests I remunerate you for what you have done up to this point, and then we go our separate ways. It appears your investigation has turned to placing me as much as my own adversary, as this madman, out to bring to me some strange psychological attack, if indeed that's what it is." After a moment's quiet pause, Holmes stated, "You, sir, are able to recompense to me what you will over the matter thus far. It will have no effect on my own actions from this point forward." "That is a strange business arrangement, sir," said Harden with some bitterness, looking across at my friend with indignation and a certain anger. "This is a strange case, and I will fix my solution to the unusual aspects of what has become apparent to me. I have researched some of the more illustrative aspects of what has been put before you by our unknown friend, and have gained some understanding of the tableau which has become the central theme of your terror. This understanding points solely in the direction of Haiti." Holmes became confident. Then he continued, "You or those in your employ, or specifically this now mentioned servant of yours in your name, robbed the people of their payment, or created a series of supposed justifiable expenses on them. This is just as some of the Americans have done in their settlement of the Western Interior, by creating a group of company towns and company stores, wherein workers find at the end of the project that they are owed nothing by the owner, or in fact owe him more than they have made. There are other examples of how a property owner and overseer can affect the same bitter outcome. Regardless of the technique, the result is the same. I use the word robbed because it fits, even though men positioned as yourself may choose a different expression. But the truth is that I wish to meet this man, and your payment to me is now secondary to such a meeting." "So that is now your game, Mr. Holmes." The detective stood. "You began this game, sir, and made its first salvo. I cannot promise you I will finish it for you, and do not know that I owe anyone such a duty. But, as I have stated, I will meet with this person and find from him what it is he wishes for a conclusion to his actions." Together we left the room with Harden displeased and furious. We took the midday train from Charing Cross to Hatfield Station, and after nearly an hour, in a hired carriage, our driver took us to this church named for St. Alban and St. Stephen, where Holmes had previously visited. "You return, Mr. Holmes, and today of all days, we are having here our own celebration in honour of your city's event, for our laying there the cornerstone of our cathedral. I wish that I could go, but that cannot be so." "May I know your name, sir?" This man in holy garb was buoyant and registering pleasure at seeing my friend again in his presence. "Dr. John Watson, Father," I replied. "I am Father Lawrence. Should you make a writing of this adventure of your friends, please do not succumb to any Romeo and Juliet reference." "Be assured I will restrain myself," I told the man. Holmes allowed himself a smile. "I need to bother you once again, and this time I seek not a concept, but a man." "Of course, Mr. Holmes. How may I help?" "A priest who would have had some time in America. A man of some artistic abilities. A man who would have assisted a more experienced priest when he, along with this elder priest, had a mission of some kind in Haiti. This would have occurred some 7 years ago. Since that time, he would have become involved in church matters here in England, and most probably in London. But this last point is not a strict requirement." The man was stunned. "Mr. Holmes, you describe Father Francis Daystrom to his last detail. He is most certainly all of the things you have said, and he is in the heart of London, and has been for over a year. He came here from America on an artistic purpose, in fact. It is interesting you mention that quality above other parts to his history. He is attached to the Westminster Diocese and works under those who are responsible for the building of the cathedral that is being set on this very day. Though naturally he will be at work on the art for some years to come." "How do you know of his work in Haiti, Father Lawrence?" "Ah, this is no secret, and you should have well asked about his assisting one of our church's most honoured missionaries in the West Indies. For he was called on to assist the well-regarded priest, Father Roland Nelson. Father Nelson had a younger assistant, but the man became very ill and could no longer serve, so a new assistant was chosen by the diocese, and this was Father Daystrom. but he was there for only less than a year. It is strange you mention 7 years as one of your descriptions, as Father Nelson died just that many years ago, or near to that number of years. Just after his work in Haiti. "Thank you, Father," said Holmes. "You have done me a world of help." Returning to London, we took a cab which skirted Hyde Park and rode through the West End of the palace afterward, until the streets became so bottled up that it became necessary for us to alight and walk some blocks to Holmes's destination, a vast open space in Westminster where a ceremony was in progress. We were held for 20 minutes, as it was either wait or go back from where we had come, and I was able to witness the lowering of a large stone on a block and tackle into a rectangular hole in the ground, while men in holy orders of the Catholic Church presided over the event. There was eventually a polite but vigorous applause without cheer, and this signalled an end to the laying the cornerstone. And we understood this to mean we could now advance into the building that was the headquarters for the Diocese of Westminster and its clergy house, the distance of 2 city blocks from the ceremony we had just beheld. "We are having a celebration this afternoon, Mr. Holmes," a young priest said, as he walked into the guest area where we waited for the attention of any who would see us without an appointment. He continued, "But certainly we do have a man following your description. He is here as you said he would be. He is from America, but his arrival was very surprising even for our diocese." "That is less a surprise to me," said Holmes to the young man, who was a clerk in the hierarchy of the church's personnel at the house. This house we are in, I mean. It is attached to some type of rectory, is it not?" "Certainly," replied the youthful priest. "And that building is one of several which together form this campus?" My friend asked for confirmation. "Of course, Mr. Holmes," he responded. "And this man came to you with a letter, but without an overall scheme. Just as you describe, Mr. Holmes. Then who is his current superior?" "Ah, I see. The man engaged in answering my friend. Well, he was naturally placed under the supervision of Reverend Father Michaels, an auxiliary bishop to his Most Reverend, the Archbishop Vaughan. Laying the cornerstone has been Father Vaughan's life work. By that I mean to see the cathedral rise in London. The man you seek certainly came at just the right moment for contribution to Father Vaughan's vision. I myself have seen his sketches, and they are of the finest quality. All of these gentlemen I see filing through your doors below," said Holmes. "These would be the Archbishop, his auxiliary bishop, and Father Daystrom. Yes, Mr. Holmes, the ceremonies have concluded, and there will be some wine poured for the clergy. I fear you will be at some wait until Father Daystrom is available to you. This party they are about to enjoy may go on for over an hour. The Archbishop will be presenting to the clergy Father Daystrom's drawings. They are certain to appreciate his contribution. I do appreciate the nature of their celebration. Yet my time is also limited, and I shall be altering Father Daystrom's agenda to some degree." Holmes stood and walked to the throng of holy men making their way through the grand entrance of the building, just below us, at where the stairs joined the large room. He stood looking down at them all, a singular being by himself at the top of the stairs they were all about to ascend. "Father Daystrom, my name is Sherlock Holmes. I was curious over whether you would consider sharing with me some respite, perhaps in one of your more secluded cloisters." The men as a group stopped in mid-climbing of the stairs. Each of them looked from Holmes to the man he had addressed, who was towards the end of the procession. After some assorted voices and low murmurs, the man spoke. "Welcome to the clergy house, Mr. Holmes. I shall be at liberty another time. Now I am in service to his most reverend father." The man leaned his head toward a bespectacled man of dark hair, in an archbishop's mitre. "Oh, I am sorry to have incommoded you on such a day. Perhaps then you will not mind if I ask the priest who has been serving me here to direct me to such a place where my friend and I might be alone and take in the afternoon. I shall be passing the time while enjoying a Lager Vista cigar." The reaction given by the man I now understood to be Father Daystrom was one that had obviously been intended by Holmes, as he was immediately flustered. He recovered, and he appeared to be on the verge of responding, but his speech was interrupted by the central figure, who all of the men had given their deference. Complete silence was given as he addressed my friend. "Mr. Holmes, I am Father Herbert Vaughan, in service to the Church in so much as this diocese is concerned. As you have decided to speak to one of our flock, well, to one whom we have taken into our fold recently, and whose interest we love and will protect, do you not believe you would have some courtesy in more carefully approaching our brother, instead of toying with him before us and before his colleagues? I do not know of this larga vista of which you speak, but this long view, as it would translate, is not lost on me, nor on any of us, I dare say, in it having some double meaning. Please allow our train to enter above and into our own celebration room, near to where you stand, and then wait but a few moments' time, and any service the good Father or my office can give to you will be made available. Is that, Mr. Holmes, not more charitable than throwing at Father Daystrom some hidden allusion? Sherlock Holmes bowed to the Archbishop, demonstrating not only his appreciation for the man's magnanimity, but also in demonstration that he, Holmes, was acknowledging his bravado had created some form of trespass, and that he wished to demonstrate amends for what he had done. He pivoted back to where he originally was before the men had moved to the stairs, and once more joined me in the seats left out at the top of the landing for those who would beg an audience with one of the senior members of the clergy. The group of holy men walked up the stairs past us and continued into a room followed by the priest who had been our host. But as he passed Sherlock Holmes, Father Daystrom peripherally eyed him with a look of enraged scorn. Quarter of an hour later, the young priest, who was presumably something of an aide-de-camp to the clergy house, opened the door for the very man. He left this private celebration of theirs for the laying of the cornerstone of the cathedral, and walked to where we sat as Holmes and I rose to meet him. He spoke to the both of us. I believe our discussion would best be served in the kind of place you suggested. Please follow me. Father Daystrom was dressed in the simple black that was typical of his order, with only his white clerical collar denoting his association with the Catholic priesthood. I had seen him earlier with a festive sash about him, but that had been removed, and his style had become taciturn and businesslike. He was probably in his mid-30s in years, with rosy cheeks over a dark complexion, brown hair that was short and neatly combed, and generally with lines of wear more from travel and the sun than wear, and life's worries. Together we sat within an archway under its shade. So, Mr. Holmes, you found me or you found me out, and then you found me. I should say that if Harden would not have consulted with an expert, he would have become none the wiser, and I would still be making my sketch work for the cathedral's stained glass, and you would be working on something altogether different. Were my set pieces so easy to connect with me? Why is Harden not with us? Are you indeed going to jibe at me with one of his tobacco leaves rolled into the Cuban version of what was originally a Haitian product? I suppose that part you have figured out by now. The man regarded Sherlock Holmes with some interest, and his expression over the following few minutes, where the detective outlined his prima facie case, showed the man a deep appreciation at his adversary's power. What I have figured out is that you have chosen a very clever way to persecute John Vincent Harden, basing his persecution on something he would understand, yet not fully understand. But the swerve in what you created is you not having the depth of knowledge from which to draw in presenting to him an accurate version of what was to be the basis of his torment. And so you accidentally threw in front of him an iconography that was the symbolic equivalent of gibberish. You never penetrated deeply enough to learn what Vodou was, unlike Father Nelson, who had spent so many years in the western region of Hispaniola, that he did become acquainted with the details of the religion. On hearing this last, the man did not hide from us his utter surprise at what Holmes had learned about him, almost as if by magic. I admit that knowing of you, or at least knowing of your reputation as I do, this knowing of you pales as a very poor counterfeit to hearing you speak. You indeed possess powers that are not of this world, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, so says His Holiness, to this day, as reported by him to his closest intimates. It was Archbishop Manning of this same diocese, the predecessor of the man whom you just met, and who spoke with you on those stairs, who urged His Holiness to seek you out directly, Mr. Holmes, for you to travel to Rome as you did, and discover for him a solution related to the cameos that were taken from one of the palaces. Holmes tilted his head toward the man for a fleeting acceptance of the praise being awarded him. Afterward he said, "Did you wish for this interview to include Mr. Harden? You are correct that I chose not to include him at this time, but that is easily remedied. I wish nothing more than the man know the harm his overseer inflicted upon the people of that island. They worked the fields for months, and under the suggestion of Father Nelson, and the man's heart was crushed after all of the trappings of Harden's men. Harden was an absentee landlord, devoid of any real interest in what became of his first attempt at cultivation." The man had spoken in a sorrowful tone. He took in a collective breath and said, "How did you come to the conclusion I was involved?" "Cultivation," said Holmes. "Your use of both Azaka Medei and Saint Isidore the farmer as a blended being. This meant my search had to conform to a very specific standard of a man with a very specific history. Even the small fetish you left of the bag of earth and pipes, which are the accoutrements of this being, showed you to be such a man. Your correct use of skulls, but your failure to understand they would never be coloured as they were done so by you, showed you to be such a man. You had to be a holy man, and you had to be junior to another father who knew far better than you about the people who practiced voodoo. It was one of several things that caused you to have less of a pedigree along this line than that of Father Nelson. Your late arrival in Haiti, and only in service to your superior in ways that would not require you to know the people and their history, but be more of a helper than a pioneer, this made sense to me of who you had to be. You had to know something about voodoo, but not enough to know why one who cared about that religion as a believer would never for his own sake revere Isidore in the form of Isidore. You had to be a man who could travel as needed, and your profession does allow for that, for you have a talent which is sought after, and indeed you fit that factor perfectly. Your artistic skills must be greatly appreciated. I truly enjoy the staining of glass, but in its creation I am honest with you that unlike my recent misdeeds, I do not take a pride in my art, and hold to it only in the most Christian understanding of giving without conceit. I will take you at your word, Father Daystrom. When it comes to your work, I only reasoned you to have worked with Franz Meyer and Company to achieve the stained glass for the cathedral in South Carolina's Charleston. Many go 5 lifetimes not to see one cathedral be erected. I am twice blessed to be able to work for the making of 2 within the same decade. Saying this, Daystrom may have left the promise he had made to himself, and showed a type of pride in his artistry. The man finished with, "After my work here, I cannot say to where God's hand will guide my superiors to place me in a new circumstance, perhaps far from these islands, and I will be gone and take with me my torments. Not until you settle matters with friend Harden," Holmes said with conviction. "He does perhaps deserve your treatment of him in the manner you have chosen, but ultimately he deserves a more honest approach. I will not render judgment, but it is time for you to deal with him, man to man. You should let him know about the harm he caused, especially to Father Nelson, and how he was crushed." Father Daystrom turned in his chair. I am torn between the ideal of Christian charity and an admitted anger for what became of one of the most decent men I had ever worked with. I was not long his apprentice, but it was well enough he taught me to bring others to the Christ without telling them their culture was bankrupt or evil, as too many of my brethren have done. I wonder if Mr. John Harden has truly reflected on his damages. You and I both know that is for another to decide, but Harden can, however, be placed in position to perform the reparation of giving to those islanders he ultimately cheated the value of their labour, and by doing so work to receive from his conscience an earthly justice. Holmes looked to the man. A path to forgiveness is always made for those who ask, at the time of their good acts. In this instance, Harden's soul is in his own hands.